All right, we've spent a lot of time digging into the theory behind radio jamming, but now it's time to see how it all plays out in the real world. In this explainer, we're moving from the textbook to the field, using Chapter 14 of our guide to analyze actual jamming incidents. This is where we see how those principles hold up when things get messy.
Okay, before we dive in, we have to cover our standard disclaimer. This is part 14 of a 20-part tutorial, and it's based on the RFI Detectives Report, an introduction to radio jamming and how to identify. Everything we're talking about is for educational and interference mitigation purposes. That's it. Remember, using jamming equipment is illegal in most places, and the penalties are no joke. This whole tutorial is designed to help you, as an RF technician, legally identify, locate, and report these jamming signals, and we're sticking strictly to the material in Chapter 14 today.
So here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with why case studies are so important. Then we'll dissect a typical incident to understand its anatomy. From there, we'll get into the exciting part, the hunt for the source. After that, we'll cover the critical job of building an official record, and we'll wrap up with the key lessons that we, as technicians, can take away from all this.
First up, learning from the field. You know, all the theory and technical specs in the world are one thing, but this is where the rubber really meets the road. Case studies are how you take that abstract knowledge and forge it into real, practical field expertise.
It's one thing to read about how a jammer works, right? But it's a whole other thing to see how a real-world incident actually went down. Analyzing these past events is an absolutely core skill for any RF professional. It's what trains your brain to tell the difference between purposeful, illegal interference and all the other unintentional noise that's constantly out there.
So when you're in the middle of an active incident, how do you make sense of the chaos? Well, you do it by understanding its anatomy. We're about to break down the key components you need to be looking for. This gives you a framework, a kind of mental map to follow, whether you're on the scene or just reviewing a report later.
Which, of course, brings us to a really important question. What does a complete professional incident report actually look like? What are the non-negotiable, essential pieces of information that have to be in there? Think of this as your mental checklist for literally any incident. First, what was the target? GPS, cell signals, Wi-Fi. Next, how bad was the impact? How do we detect it in the first place? Then you've got the summary of the investigation, how you triangulated the source, and finally, how it was all resolved. A solid report has answers for every single one of these, painting a full picture from start to finish. And this brings us to what's often the most active and honestly, the most exciting part of any response, the hunt. This isn't just a technical procedure, you guys. It's a detective story that's written in radio waves, and you're the detective, trying to trace an invisible clue back to its source. The whole essence of the hunt is summed up perfectly in this quote from the report. It all comes down to one thing, direction finding. So what does that actually look like out in the field? It's a super systematic three-step process. First, you use your spectrum analyzer to detect and confirm that you've got an interfering signal. Step 2, you grab a directional antenna and you start taking bearings from a few different spots. Think of it like drawing lines on a map. And Step 3, where those lines cross, bingo, you've just pinpointed your source. This is the fundamental skill for tracking down an illegal jammer. Finding the jammer feels like a huge win. And it is. But listen, your job isn't done. Now you have to build the official record. And this part is just as important as the hunt, because without a solid, undeniable record, all your amazing fieldwork might not hold up.
To make sure all that hard work stands up to scrutiny, you have to follow what are called field response protocols. Now that might sound super formal and like a bunch of boring paperwork, but really, these standardized procedures are what make your evidence valid, they make your response effective, and they ensure nothing gets missed.
And it all starts with being precise. Every single measurement you take has to be logged with an exact timestamp. When did you first detect the signal? What was its strength? When did you take that first bearing? Trust me, the details matter immensely.
And this one is huge. Whenever you possibly can, you need to capture the raw IQ data. This is basically the signal's digital fingerprint. It is the ultimate proof, and it allows for some really deep analysis back in the lab long after you've left the field. And finally, don't forget the supercomputer you've got in your pocket. Use your phone. Take pictures of everything, your equipment setup, the location where you found the device, the jammer itself, anything else in the environment that seems relevant. Visuals provide context that numbers and data just can't. Okay, so let's pull all of this together. Why do we go through this whole rigorous process of analysis and documentation? It's simple.
because doing all this makes you a much more effective and much more valuable technician.
So here are the core lessons. First, master the framework so you automatically know what to look for. Second, trust the process, especially with direction finding. Don't take shortcuts. Third, document everything. Your notes become the official record, so make them good. And finally, learn and adapt. Every single case you analyze, whether you're there in person or just reading a report, makes you better prepared for the next one.
And that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Technology never, ever stands still. The jammers we see today are way more sophisticated than the ones from 5 years ago. So, as jamming technology keeps evolving, how are the case studies of tomorrow going to be different? What new challenges will we be trying to deconstruct in the future? That's something for all of us in this field to keep in the back of our minds. Thanks for joining me.